Hello and welcome. I'm Vijay Srinivas. In this special interview, we're joined by author Ms. Priyambada Jayakumar, who's here in the city of Chennai for the grand launch of her book, The Man Who Fed India, that takes us through the life and times of celebrated agricultural scientist Bharat Ratna Dr. MS Swaminathan. Thank you very much, Priyambada, for your time.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure, and you've already tweeted, done an excerpt of my article, which is very well received. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Kudos to you on the cover. The Man Who Fed India rightly sums up the life of, the father of Green Revolution in India. So you've known Dr. Swaminathan for a pretty long time. He was family, but when you began researching about him, formally for this book, what was the most astonishing bits that you came across?
Many. In fact, I wouldn't know where to start and where to stop because there are many astonishing bits about the book. But if I gave out too much, then people wouldn't buy and read. So I'm not going to give you too much. I'll give you just a little teaser. He was at Birla House when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. He was actually there. He was attending a prayer meeting. He was a student at the Indian Agricultural Research Institute, and he was attending the prayer meeting when gunshots were heard. So I think that was one of the most astounding things which my research threw up. Apart from the fact that his life was literally a veritable cauldron of stories. And there were so many stories which are uncovered because this is not the first book which has been written about him. Dr. Swaminathan, given his, mammoth 98 years, has had many books written about him, but most focused on his agricultural trysts and his agricultural achievements. Very few focused on the human stories behind all the agricultural achievements because at the end of the day, don't forget, any transformation always had a human being at the end. The receiving line stops with the human being. So I uncovered the human stories behind the man.
His marriage to Meena Swaminathan comes across as such an equal partnership. Two minds committed to service, education, reform. But how did that relationship anchor him through the highs and lows of his career?
Well, you're almost stealing parts of my speech, but I'll tell you this much right now. That was what I was trying to say when I was getting up on stage. That MS Swaminathan wouldn't be the MS Swaminathan he was without Meena Swaminathan. She was his catalyst, she was his North Pole, she was the wind beneath his wings. And she was the reason he reached and climbed those astounding peaks. Because regardless of whatever he achieved, it wasn't for her support, MS Swaminathan wouldn't be the giant he's considered today. He's a giant slayer when it comes to food security, not just in India, but across the world. And it was her sacrifice which made MS reach the pinnacles of success that he did. Because wherever you look, we always stand on the shoulders of giants. And sometimes those giants are just family members who support us through our toughest, most trying, and even our most triumphant times.
There's also a lovely thread in the book about malady, remedy of his father.
Yes.
This idea that every problem must have a solution rooted in compassion and science, and pretty much what MS Swaminathan did in his life.
But that was the genesis of all his ideas, that for every malady there is a remedy, provided you have the time, the energy and the compassion to look for the remedy. Some people give up halfway because it's too time consuming or it's not possible. People, failures can sometimes deter us from our end goal if you don't persevere. But he persevered.
Okay. I also found this one interesting. You also wrote about his fascination for Ramana Maharshi, the sage of Arunachala, and who preached self-realization to this world through silence. That's don't you see this as some kind of a contrast to Swaminathan's career? Because he dealt with science and policy making, and on the spiritual side, his a completely different personality altogether.
Because we are all anchored differently, and our anchors are very different from our final selves. Sometimes our anchors are complete antithesis of who we really are. But that is why they anchor us, because it's so different.
Okay, so your chapters on women are too powerful as well. What did Swaminathan understand about gender and agriculture that today's policymakers are missing it?
I think today's policymakers still haven't utilized any of his suggestions. That farming, if you ask anybody, a layperson on the road, ask them to describe a farmer, what are the first things you will hear? Male, bullock, furrow, and tallow. There's never a woman in the conversation. But most of the threshing, most of the planting, most of the weeding is done by women. But women are very rarely given the kind of kudos which I think women farmers deserve. And I think he, in his entire lifespan of 98 years, did everything that he could to bring women farmers, up, in society, to be given equal access to credit, land titles, and to be given equal space, under the sun. as, much as male farmers got. But I think we're very far away from any of his recommendations.
Well, he's known as the father of green revolution in India. He also termed the term called the evergreen revolution, right?
Yes.
So, a call for sustainability in the long term. If he were here today, what do you think he would say about India's current farm distress, be it climate change and, genetically modified crops and so on?
When it comes to GM crops, and a lot of people have told me, why didn't I touch upon that in the book? My book is not a technical agricultural book, simply because I'm not a technical agricultural expert. I'm a historian by training. For him, genetic technology was like a knife. It can be used to cut fruit, but equally it can kill. So it depends on, technology depends on its deployment, on its use. You use it wisely, you use it compassionately, you use it humanely, it serves a humane purpose. You use it cruelly, you use it for business, you use it for ends, you use it for means which don't justify the ends, then you are creating a Frankenstein in the process.
One last question there. What do you hope that today's youngsters who are reading this book, young scientists, got to be taking away from this book?
That science without compassion is a waste of everybody's time, including science. Because at the end of the day, Professor Swaminathan's science was everything that he was. Inclusive, intrepid, and very, very egalitarian. His science was democratic, and his scientific methods were even more so. When he started the Green Revolution, he made sure that the seeds, those magic seeds, were given first to the poorest farmers. And then when the poorest farmers realized there was magic on their fields, word reached the richest farmers.
Yeah.
So his bottoms-up approach has been what has kind of defined his science and his scientific outreach all his life. That compassion and science starts from the ground up. You go from the ground up so that the poorest can have access to the best technologies first. That was, the sole criteria of his science. A science with humanity, and a science with compassion, and a science with heart.
That's a nice way to end the interview. Thank you very much, Priyambada, for talking to us. Thank you.